This might just be the Famicom game with the most confusing title. The full title of this one is Moulin Rouge Senki Melville no Hono, or Chronicles of Moulin Rouge, Melville's Flame. Now you might be wondering, what does this have to do with the famous Parisian cabaret? And the answer is absolutely nothing. There aren't even any red windmills in it. No, Moulin Rouge is the name of the adventuring party that you control. Now from that, you might think that this is an RPG. It's not. This is a paper-thin strategy game. This is our first Famicom game by Gakken, nominally an educational book publisher, but since it was the 80s in Japan, they really were involved in a bunch of different media. So even at this late date, people are still entering the Famicom game business. Though Gakken doesn't last long, publishing only one other game. The story is that the gods gave a king who helped them Melville's Flame, a divine treasure. When the king died, there was a revolt, and the kingdom was split in 4, with the treasure lost. And you control the 4-person adventuring party that the rightful king has entrusted to recover the treasure and subjugate the land. To do that, you have to hire troops to form an army, and then capture a series of castles on large overworld maps. You can only recruit troops in town, and you can't return to the town that you started out from. You'll have to find a town as you're walking around. While in town, you can also buy additional equipment for your troops, get some food for an extended campaign, or donate to a temple to increase your stats. The most important decision you're going to make in this game is your army composition. Each adventurer can control one type of unit at a time, and can have up to 64 of those units. The actual maximum depends on their leadership stat, which is the only stat that they have. Some units can only be controlled by certain heroes. There are 3 basic classifications of units that will help you know how to use them. First, there's melee units, like swordsmen and spearmen. They can only attack from the front position. Then there's short-range units, like chariots. They can attack from any position, but can only attack the front-line enemy. Finally, the long-range units can attack anything. As you're walking around the world, you'll either see these silhouettes that represent stationed armies, or you'll get into random battles. You'll get a chance to check out the other army's composition first, and then you can start giving orders. The very first thing you need to do in your first battle is hit select and arrange your troops. Because the rules of who can attack and who can be attacked are so rigid in this game, which unit you have up front makes a big difference. You shouldn't have more than one melee unit in your army. Everyone else needs to be some kind of ranged attacker. And that melee unit, if you have one, has to be up front. You have exactly 3 commands in battle. Attack, and then you pick out your target. Defend, which reduces the effects of enemy attacks by about 80%. And run away, which you never want to do because that reduces your leadership score and causes you to lose a lot of troops. You can also use special items if you have them. How much damage a unit does depends on how many soldiers are in it. So as that number decreases, they become less effective. Now the clever among you may have noticed that there's a simple, obvious strategy for Melville no Hono. Basically, put a high defense melee unit up front, and only have them defend. They'll soak up all of the enemy attacks and barely even get hurt. Then have the other 3 units attack the largest groups, which will have the effect of reducing your own losses even further. There are a couple of wrinkles to this. Money's hard to come by, and you have to replenish your troops, so you probably want somebody cheap up front. Swordsman's not a bad pick for it at 2 gold each. But archers are cheaper, and they can give you another attack if needed. There is one good reason to not use melee units at all in your army. When you reach the castle, it'll be a 2-part battle, and the first part takes place outside of the walls where you have to attack the enemies within the castle. So on turn 1, your melee units just drop out. They'll come back when it's time for the hand-to-hand fighting. Enemy armies don't fight to the death. Once you give them enough losses, they'll just quit. Winning a battle just gets you a bit of money. There's no experience or anything like that. The money scaling is actually a bit rough in Melville no Hono. it's possible to get stuck in a situation where you don't have the money to replace your troops and can't win a battle to earn more money. Defeating a castle brings up a special screen where you can check around for the king, loot everything, and give your troops a rest. Resting is something you can do while walking around the overworld as well. You hit A to bring up this menu, and the options here are to battle, check out your stats, or set up camp. Camping costs a bit of food, and it only refreshes your army's exhaustion level. They get tired out if you march them through the desert for a while. Going back to the starting point of the region will let you teleport to other regions that you've unlocked. And there's a few different continents that you have to slowly work your way through. There's also a first-person dungeon very late in the game, though I didn't get a chance to see that. Navigating the overworld map is a real pain. It's not really clear where you can and can't walk, especially since sometimes you can go through things that it looks like you can't. It seems like there always has to be a 2-space gap for you to fit through, even though you never properly align with a 2-space gap. Getting started in Melville no Hono is really rough. The starting region for the initial continent that you're supposed to go to doesn't have a town in it, so whatever troops you bring in has to last the whole way to the castle and the whole way back. Then with this region under your control, you can warp to a region with a town pretty close to where you start out. All of the combats, including the ones fixed in place, are a bit randomized. The makeup of the army will remain the same, but the quantity of troops changes dramatically. Bad luck can stick you pretty bad as you're starting out in this game. Melville no Hono is another one of those Famicom games that nobody remembers exists. It mainly seems to ensnare people into thinking that it's an RPG, and then they find a really shallow strategy game instead. I feel like this is a game that wound up missing the mark a lot. The big ideas are sound, but they chose every wrong decision when it came to making those into a game. I can see the vague outline of something that could have been really good here, and instead we have this disappointing failure.